On the morning of August 27, 1967, what was supposed to be a routine and exhilarating skydiving exercise quietly set itself on a path toward disaster. At a small airfield in Ohio, a group of civilian parachutists prepared for a high-altitude jump they had trained for and trusted. Many of them were experienced recreational skydivers. Some were veterans. Others were enthusiasts chasing the familiar rush of freefall. None of them believed they were boarding an aircraft that would carry them toward one of the deadliest parachuting accidents in American history. The aircraft waiting on the tarmac was a modified B-25 Mitchell bomber, a twin-engine plane originally designed for World War II combat missions. By the late 1960s, surplus military aircraft like the B-25 were commonly repurposed for civilian uses, including cargo hauling, air shows, and parachuting operations. The plane had been converted to accommodate jumpers, with its bomb bay altered and doors configured for exit. To those boarding it that day, the aircraft represented reliability and power, not danger. Weather conditions, however, were already less than ideal. A thick layer of clouds blanketed much of the region, obscuring landmarks and reducing visibility. Still, the flight was cleared. The pilot relied heavily on onboard radar and navigational instruments to determine position, a practice that was not uncommon but left little room for error. Ground references were effectively erased by the cloud cover, turning the flight into a calculated gamble against distance, timing, and assumption. As the aircraft climbed, the jumpers performed routine checks. Harnesses were secured, parachutes were inspected, altimeters were read and reread. Inside the plane, there was no indication that anything was wrong. No sudden turbulence, no alarms, no warning that the aircraft had gradually drifted off its intended route. Unbeknownst to everyone on board, except perhaps the instruments themselves, the plane was no longer above farmland. It was moving steadily over open water. The plan was simple. At altitude, the jumpers would exit the aircraft, fall through the clouds, and deploy their parachutes over rural terrain where recovery teams waited. The assumption that land lay below them was absolute. None of the jumpers were equipped with flotation devices. Life vests were not considered necessary. No one anticipated water entry, let alone entry into a massive body of water known for sudden winds and unpredictable currents. When the jump signal was finally given, there was no hesitation. One by one, 18 parachutists exited the aircraft, vanishing into the dense cloud layer below. Their parachutes deployed as expected. From a technical standpoint, everything worked exactly as designed. That fact would later become one of the most haunting elements of the tragedy. As the jumpers descended through the clouds, reality revealed itself in fragments. Gray gave way to movement. Movement gave way to scale. And then the truth became unavoidable. Below them stretched the vast, cold expanse of Lake Erie. There was no land in sight, no fields, no roads, only water, whipped by wind, extending toward the horizon. At that point, there was nothing they could do. The winds were strong, and parachutes offered little horizontal control. Panic set in, but panic had nowhere to go. Each jumper was committed to the descent. They hit the surface of the lake scattered across a wide area, separated by distance and time. Water landings are among the most dangerous scenarios for parachutists, especially when unplanned. Upon impact, parachute canopies can collapse, drag, or entangle the jumper. Lines can wrap around limbs, restricting movement. Heavy equipment absorbs water almost instantly, adding weight and pulling bodies downward. Without flotation gear, survival becomes a race measured in seconds. Some of the parachutists attempted to cut themselves free. Others fought against the canopy, pulling them beneath the surface. The cold shock of the water robbed muscles of strength. Exhaustion followed quickly. One by one, the jumpers disappeared beneath the waves. Emergency response was initiated as soon as the scale of the disaster became clear. Rescue boats were dispatched, but Lake Erie is vast, and the jumpers have been scattered over miles. Wind and waves complicated visibility. By the time rescuers reached the general area, many of the parachutists had already drowned. Only 2 survived. One was rescued by a passing boat that happened to be close enough to intervene. The other managed to stay afloat long enough to reach shore after hours of swimming, driven by sheer will and desperation. The remaining 16 were lost to the lake. Recovery operations stretched on for days. Bodies were found drifting or submerged, tangled in parachute lines. Equipment surfaced slowly, marking the locations where lives had ended. The scale of the loss stunned the parachuting community and shocked the nation. 18 people had jumped. All parachutes had deployed. 16 people had died. Investigators moved quickly to determine how such a catastrophic navigational failure had occurred. The conclusion was both simple and devastating. The aircraft had strayed miles off course. The pilot, relying on radar and instruments while flying through dense cloud cover, misjudged the plane's position. Despite uncertainty, the decision was made to proceed with the jump rather than abort or delay until visual confirmation could be achieved. There was no mechanical failure, no sabotage, no single dramatic error. Instead, the disaster was the result of compounded assumptions, procedural complacency, and the fatal choice to continue operations despite limited situational awareness. In aviation and parachuting alike, assumptions can be lethal. The tragedy prompted widespread reevaluation of civilian parachuting regulations. New safety requirements were introduced, including mandatory flotation devices for overwater flights, stricter weather minimums, and clearer protocols for positional verification before jump authorization. What had been overlooked before could no longer be ignored. For the families of the victims, the answers offered little comfort. 16 lives were lost, not to reckless thrill-seeking, but to a chain of decisions made under the belief that everything was under control. The victims had trusted the process, the aircraft, and the people guiding them. That trust proved fatal. Today, the Lake Erie parachuting disaster remains a grim reminder of how quickly routine can become irreversible. It stands as one of the deadliest civilian skydiving accidents in history, not because parachutes failed, but because certainty was assumed where doubt should have halted everything. 18 people stepped out of an airplane believing land awaited them below. 16 never returned, and the lake, silent and unchanged, keeps their story beneath its surface.